Second Happy Wednesday. Second because we recorded this, but we were using the wrong audio input. Shame, which makes it a less Happy Wednesday, but it's happy nonetheless. Today we are going to be doing a rundown of Tinto Talks number 71, which is titled 9th of July 2025. I think they've normally had titles, but what this is going to be the Mesoamerican religions in the upcoming game with the codename Project Caesar, which of course everyone's excited about, everyone's teased by it, so it's really Project Teaser. And if you're a person of culture who knows how to pronounce words, Project Tysar. And so we are going to be taking a look at this. Now, we have played the game quite a bit at this point, but we haven't really gotten to play with this religion. But since we already recorded this once and that recording was scuffed, we have read through all of this. And so we're going to give our thoughts on it, knowing the mechanics and this type of thing as we proceed through it. So let's get into it. Hello and welcome to another Tinto Talks, the Happy Wednesday. Pavia, of course, is welcoming us to the Tinto Talks and wishing us a happy Wednesday without the holiday salutation. Terrible. But on Friday, much to our chagrin and much to our, confusion, he's going to welcome the Friday, as he has been doing for some weeks now, which is obviously a hidden message. What that message is hiding, we know not, except we have seen Pavia for several weeks now. We have not seen Johan for several weeks. I'm convinced they're keeping Johan in a trunk somewhere, and that is why we are not getting the Happy Wednesday with the capitalized happy. It's terrible. It's a terrible thing. Where's Johan? I don't know. He's in a trunk. They've got him in a trunk in Sitges somewhere. But, of course, continuing on, where we talk about Europa Universalis 5. Now, this is... people need to wake up. This is obviously not the real name of the game. Why would you name a sequel to Europa Universalis 5? Sequel to Europa Universalis 4, Europa Universalis 5. It's an absurdity. Everyone knows that this is an anagram at this point. Some people are in denial, so I guess those people don't know. It's also a river in Africa. Shout out to the loud car outside. But the real name of the game is, of course, an anagram of this, which is rapier, a sinuous valve. Every time I think about sinuous, I think about valves, and then I grab my rapier, whatever that means. Today we will talk about the tonal religions. This is a religious group that covers the Mesoamerican religions, which we are going to very consistently mispronounce the deities of throughout this entire thing. I know that I'm not pronouncing them right. This is the best I can do. So continuing in tonal religions, it's going to include the following. Nahua ritualism, reformed Nahua ritualism, which is like Nahua ritualism, but it's reformed. Tonal, Mayan ritualism, and Chichimeca, which of course we butchered in terms of pronunciation, but speaking of butchering in terms of actuality, we have Nahua ritualism, which is going to have the most detailed features, and the reason we are bringing them up because they butchered in human sacrifice. Yay! For this religion, we are going to very interestingly have a lot more slave mechanics than other religions, and this is going to be interesting because slavery is really strong. I don't know what slaves working with raw materials means though. So currently, is my understanding that slaves can work in buildings that specify that they use slaves, or for RGOs, and this is it. And slaves are actually very, very strong because you don't need to teach them anything. They don't need qualifications. Like with most RGOs, you need laborers. With slaves, they're just ready to work, and by ready to work, coerced under pain of death to work. And so what this means is that you don't have to wait for all your qualifications to tick up, and also, if your qualifications aren't going to laborers, they'll be going to something else, so it frees up your qualifications. So slavery actually seems like a really strong mechanic. And the question is, does this slave working with raw material allow them to work additional types of jobs? If so, this religion is quite strong, just off the back of this alone, in terms of phases of the game where qualifications are going to be a throttle. Qualifications won't always be a throttle, but they are going to be a throttle through some phases of the game. I don't know if this applies to buildings that produce raw materials, because there's a class of buildings that produce raw materials that traditionally come from RGOs. They're a little bit less efficient, but they give you a lot of flexibility. Or if this refers to stuff that uses RGOs to make other materials. So like tools use iron to make raw materials. Does this allow slaves to work in these buildings? I don't know, but if they allow slaves to work in any additional buildings, I do think that this will be quite strong. Continuing on here, we have army morale plus 10%, because of course this is unrestricted slavery. Catch these hands. Anyone is, equal opportunity of slavery, and they want to fight hard. That way they don't become enslaved. This, of course, makes a whole ton of sense. It reminds me of the rather horrifying Stalin quote, "It takes a brave man not to be a hero in the Red Army," which I found that over 50% of people don't get why that's so horrifying. So if you got it, And then, of course, we can also recruit Eagle and Jaguar warriors, which we aren't going to get to take a look at, womp womp, although it would be nice to be able to see that. But speaking of Eagle warriors, in Age of Empires 2, they run faster, and there is going to be a run faster mechanic that we will see at the end of the video. So, coming down here, we have the panel for religion. This is kind of what everyone sees. For their religions, we see a little bit of tolerance and a little bit of, not so tolerance. And we see some of the religious modifiers for our religion specifically. Notably, the mechanic of doom, and also the presence of 6 gods. That's more gods, the more gods, the better. And doom is going to be a bit mechanic for the Nahuatl. Or Nahua religion, sorry. I just add TLs everywhere because my brain thinks it's probably, if I'm missing it, it probably should be in there. We have religious aspects we can add, and we have religious focus. We have adopt Ometeotl, we have elevate our patron god, we have established the Chuakuatl, a position, expand Pipitilin, or increase militarism, institute the flower wars, legal reforms, and then we have legal reforms. So it's just like that law, office of Johnson and Johnson, where it's 2 Johnsons that got together, shout out to Johnsons getting together, and they were just like, hey, why don't we name our thing Johnson and Johnson? And it just sounds very silly, but it's very serious because it's a legal practice. Please don't sue me if you're watching this, Johnson and Johnson. And then, of course, we can raise the sacrifice rate. Yay! Human sacrifice. Whee! Okay, so we also have some religious action, appease the gods, host ceremony, open a war path. That's our favorite type of path when we are, sacrificing humans. And pilgrimage to Chololan, reform society, and let's get and taking a look at the Doom, which is an old EU4 friend. Of course, this game is not going to be titled EU5, but rather it's going to be named after whatever we said at the beginning of this video. So, taking a look at Doom, we do have, it's a special currency used by countries with the Nahua religion. Owning locations, especially urban locations, passively increases Doom. So as you urbanize, Doom will follow. Having a high Doom value decreases loyalty to Overlord and stability decay, but increases a state satisfaction equilibrium. A little bit interesting. It's going to be very interesting if you actually want to thread the needle and maintain high Doom without getting to 100 Doom, which I imagine is going to be bad. Decreasing loyalty to Overlord, maybe not that big a deal overall. And stability decay is a big deal though. Stability is a very useful thing to have. It helps with qualifications, and so we're kind of seeing, to some extent, phases of the game where you care about qualifications might highly inform how you feel about how good this religion is. But increases the state satisfaction equilibrium. This is something we like. It allows us to effectively tax more or get benefits out of bonuses more. So this is going to be useful. When maximum Doom is finally reached, you get Gloom, which is, of course, always follows Doom, but the ruler and their entire dynasty are sacrificed, womp womp, and replaced with a new ruler. So I am assuming that this is generally something you want to avoid, unless you don't like your ruler, in which case this is a way to get rid of them, and by doing so, you can maybe get a better ruler with better stats, this type of thing, and so it's going to give you a little of additional control, just like the Japanese culture / religion can utilize Subaru, that is the vehicle, the off-road vehicle for off-road terrain, in order to get rid of their ruler. And so getting a little bit of control in there, or control over who rules the country, is kind of interesting. We have Doom. It's going to change by 0.01 each month, which of course is moving, much like the loud car outside is moving, and this is going to be driven by urban areas. And then we have city location rank is driving that. I imagine this is one city, so when you get pretty heavily urbanized, this is going to really drive up the Doom, I suspect. As you can see, yes we can also read, Doom accumulates over time, and the bigger the country is, the more the Doom accumulates. It can be mitigated by either performing some mechanics, such as killing enemies and looting locations, woohoo, or by some of the religious actions. But there's only one way of completely escaping it, which is, of course, the Gloom. Reforming the religion. I don't know about that. I'm pretty sure when you blood sacrifice your ruler and you're RPing your ruler, you also get away from it. You could also save the game and go and take a walk. Some people have been on YouTube too long. Maybe you should consider pausing the video and taking a walk, or even closing the thing and taking a walk. That is a way to escape, the doom of this religion. But other than that, you will have to reform the religion. This can be achieved by passing by enough by passing by enough religious focuses the former EU4 reforms. I feel like this English isn't necessarily correct, but we'll not focus on it. We of course have all of these, which we mispronounced before, so we will not mispronounce them again. Shout out to Johnson & Johnson. These focuses are a necessary pain, as they give a debuff to your country while they're active, but you need to accumulate more of them to be able to reform your religion. Here are some of them. Tolerance of true faith -1. I don't remember exactly how much satisfaction this translates into, but this is a pretty nasty modifier, and the other modifiers do not seem as nasty. In particular, I do believe if we pick one of the gods as our patron god, they will get more bonuses from them, and this is something we'll kind of talk about multiple times, but the Tlaloc god, giving monthly prosperity. Monthly prosperity at the opener of a game is really valuable, because prosperity has a cap of 100. Once you reach that prosperity cap, your dev will go up, and so, or not when, your dev will go up and it will cap if you have positive prosperity. You can also have negative prosperity, in which case your dev will decrease. This is important to note. Your development goes down. That's really not ideal, but once you get to 100, it's capped, and you can't increase it more to increase the rate at which your dev grows. So, at the opener of the game, getting a lot of monthly prosperity is actually incredibly valuable, because you can increase the rate at which you kind of wind up your prosperity by like a decade or something, and so this is going to be, as a religious modifier, something that's actually pretty nice to have at the beginning, and is going to inform your opener, I imagine. We also get recruiting explorer stuff, army maintenance, disease resistance. Shout out to losing 95% of our pops, because of when the white devils arrive, they will bring with them their pestilence. Shout out to smallpox. And then we will be able to establish the Chihua Coatl position, which will give us expected cost of court. This looks like it's not a lot, but it's important to remember this is a flat modifier. And so I believe it's a flat amount that is relative to the tax base, and this will determine the cost of the budget option for cost of court, which increases legitimacy, if I'm not mistaken. And so that'll be nice. But I think that these are going to be the easiest ones to give up, which is the Noble's Power. We won't necessarily dive too deep into the math in too specific a way, because this is an age-appropriate video where it's satisfactory for people under the age of 38. We don't want to bring spreadsheets into this. We're just going to talk about Subaru. And then the Noble Powers plus 100%. This effectively is not really that bad. If you already have plus 500% on estate power, adding an additional 500 or 100% doesn't add 100%. It, relative to the baseline, adds 20%. And what you care about is estate power relative to crown power. And so since you tend to accumulate a lot of estate power modifiers, or I think that it's good to accumulate a lot because privileges are quite strong, this is going to represent really not as big an increase as it would feel like. Also, nobles are not all of your estates, and giving out plus 100 power to weak estates is going to have less of a negative effect on your crown power. But if you have a plus 500% Noble's Power, adding plus 100% is just, it's not going to move the needle too much. It's the equivalent of plus 20%, whereas if you have 100% Crown Power, and there's a Crown Power modifiers are harder to find than estate modifiers, and you get plus 20% Crown Power, that's going to represent the same as the amount you get from Noble's Power. We also see the same thing for Clergy Power here, and then we also have Set Focus, and then when this is researched, we will start to get minus Doom here. I think that this is, we're setting our focus in here. But in theory, if we can focus on this in some way and get more monthly prosperity, this is something that we're interested in. So there are, these are the available religious actions. We can appease the gods, which of course is a euphemism for blood sacrifice, everyone's favorite weekend activity, fun for the whole family. Bring your kids. We have is slaves, or the modifier that is required is you need to have slaves, and you need to have greater or equal to 100 people. I noticed that this doesn't say the cost, or doesn't say that you're sacrificing the slaves, but the implication is rather obvious. It's just like, bring your slaves, and just don't expect to return home with them. We're just doing something where nothing to see here, except other than minus 10 Doom, which seems like a good amount of Doom to lose, and 100 slaves doesn't really seem like that much to give up. 100 poor souls? Okay, we will also have Hostess Ceremony, which is going to be done on a monthly basis, but their calendar is I think every 20 days, but I'm pretty sure this is just going to be monthly ticks on normal Julian calendar, or normal calendar. If these guys won the conflict with the White Devils, we would be operating on a 20-day calendar, and that would be a normal calendar, not the Julian calendar, but in honor of their deity. This time we will do something special. Here, these months last 20 days. In each month, celebration differs, etc., etc. Name we can't pronounce, but this one, again, we just have the conditions required. You just have to have over 400 slaves. We're not going to say what we're going to do to the slaves. Maybe they just get to go home. They don't get to go home. And so, again, we're getting to sacrifice blood for the blood god in order to decrease and manage our doom. We get from this the festival of the given deity, which I assume means the month that you do this on really matters. And something like reading through this I thought was really cool is it makes you care about a calendar that is not your own, which is a bit interesting. Here, I assume it's just going to be like, since there are 6 of these, I assume it's going to be every other month. There's a different one. But I imagine that sacrificing to the prosperity god in the early game is good. And then maybe once you get to the explorer phase, sacrificing to that god's good. And then once the White Devils come, sacrificing to reduce the disease resistance is going to be good. And so, continuing on here, we will also have open a warpath. We will send our emissaries to our neighbors to celebrate the flower war with them. Which is another way of saying we're going to take slaves. Yeah. Grim. Which is why we call it the Flower Wars. Where you notice here a bunch of extra cost. That's not the point. The point is taking slaves. And so this is going to be what it's about. The maintenance of our empire and the world requires a constant stream of captives. Nice euphemism for slaves. Only through a state of constant warfare can we ensure that we have access to a steady supply. The world cannot afford peace. Captives, indentured servants, non-consenting residents, and workers. The last action, Reform Society, allows the reform of the religion when enough religious aspects have been enforced, but it has a big con. It triggers the Disaster Reform Society, which needs to be resolved to become Reformed Nahuatl Society. Now, overall, this seems like there's kind of a lot of good things going on with this event, but let's read through it. We get it is time that our society undergoes a great change as we strive to defend our people against our foes. Abandoning the obsolete beliefs and administrative methods of the past, we will embrace the future through this turbulent period to come. We will trigger the disaster. We will remove the Altepetl government reform. We will gain 20 stab, which is quite a nice big chunk of stab, and we will convert to the reformed Nahua ritualism religion, where we will get a bunch of other places confirming our subjects get annexed, or our subjects with the Altepetl government type will be annexed. Interestingly, I wonder if we start with their territory integrated or not. This is an important distinction because normally if you annex your subjects, you get integrated territory, which is key for getting cores. If this isn't how this works, then you might have a little bit of a bad time. And then we have pops with over 50, or places with over 50 control will confirm to reform Nahua ritualism. Doesn't say what will happen with the subject territory that we annex if they convert as well, but if they do, that's going to be good. And then we have some conditions. I think these are the conditions to get this. We need to have completed some of these, but it doesn't say right here exactly how many of these we needed to complete, but that we will have this Reform Society disaster, which in order to complete this, we need to have greater than 20 locations. We need to have 500% subjects. I'm not sure what this means. If this means our subjects need to have 500% the territory we do, or what exactly 500% subjects means. Has completed every possible religious focus, so we have to get through the rest of them. We have enacted Reform Society action, and we are at least 80 centralization versus decentralization, which is going to be something you probably want to go towards anyways, but we don't see a negative modifier in here for the disaster. I imagine you will get some negative stuff through events. Let's read the flavor. The system of Altepetl has served our people with care and prosperity. However, our loose grip on affairs of subjects in other city-states has led to many dissenting voices against our rule. because they don't seem to like offering up their people as fodder for human sacrifice, which is of course rude. Should we wish to retain our splendor and consolidate our power, our splendor of human sacrifice, centralization reforms are necessary. We have here the Reformed Nahuatl Society, which is a major reform. You can only have one, which of course if you have eyes, you can read. But we will have here on the modifiers, revoke privilege cost. Now this seems like a modifier that's not very good, because revoking privileges is not very good, unless you have a lot of it, in which case you kind of pass a threshold where revoking privileges may be good. But in particular, I think most of the time it's just... I think that estate privileges in general are pretty good, and that in general you don't want to revoke them for a variety of reasons, but there are some really nasty ones. And so paying 90 stab to revoke them is a pretty big deal, and this will give you minus 10%, so you'll pay 81 stab instead. But okay. We also have crown power plus 33%. That's quite a lot. So if we have plus 600%, total nobles power, this is, and we're at 100% crown power. Getting this crown power is effectively the same as getting plus 200% nobles power, or something like this, in terms of the way the math works, because it's relative to one another. But it's perhaps even worth even more if you have a bunch of low control areas. Those places get malices to control, so you can actually be under 100% control. In which case, the plus 33% from a math perspective is going to be even better. But what this means is that if you're blobbing pretty aggressively and you're getting a lot of low control areas, this crown power is going to be really valuable. And it's going to be less valuable if you're not. But of course, we get possible government reforms +1, which means this is free. So if it's free, it's for me. We're going to slot that in, baby. And then we will also get monthly progress towards centralization. I think it's worth noting that your monthly progress towards a lot of things, and also centralization, is kind of, you can look at it of two ways, where 0.01 will prevent you from decaying in the other direction. So you just need any positive amount towards the direction you want, like in this case centralization, and you will not decay towards decentralization. If you have 0.01 towards decentralization, you'll start decaying in that direction. Now, but also, if you have 0.01 centralization and you have 50 centralization accumulated, you won't decay down to 1 centralization. This is an important point. So having just over the threshold is good, but also having a lot is good. So it's kind of like a double equilibrium where two different things are good. Just passing the threshold or having a lot. If you have, notably, something like 0.5 centralization, which is quite a lot, I think in general it's bad to do that because there's a lot of good privileges that give decentralization. But let's say you have that, and then you use the cabinet action, promote social value, and you promote centralization, getting another 30, let's say, then you will have ticking 0.8. Which is quite a lot, which means every month you're going to go 0.8 towards progress, and then eventually you'll settle at an equilibrium of 80. So in particular, if you can get a really large movement in the direction you want, I really do think that this is when the cabinet action promotes societal value is really good, because you can put that on for, let's say, a decade, move all the way to 80 centralization, and then pull it off, and you won't decay back down to 50, even though you only have progress of 0.5 towards centralization after you remove that cabinet action. So I do think that is kind of interesting the way you play it, and that there's a double equilibrium is kind of neat. It's probably a little strange, but I think it's also cool. And we all also give the reformed Nahua ritualism, which, as a reformed people, you might suspect that maybe we stop enslaving people. Nope. Slaves working with raw materials. Still a yes. Army morale plus 10%. We get pop conversion speed, which normally converting people to your religion, if they're slaves, releases them. But catch these hands. We have unrestricted slavery. Buy one, get one free. Not these hands, but rather these slaves. It's terrible. We're selling these people. Oh god. Anyways, tolerance of true faith. Also, really nice. Boost that satisfaction. People are satisfied with the fact that we're enslaving other people, even if they're people of the same religion or culture than us, because we have unrestricted slavery. Okay, continuing on, we have Maya ritualism. Now let's talk about another tonal religion, Maya ritualism. That's what we said, Maya ritualism, which of course is better than Nahua religion. And I know what you're saying, that's because they don't take slaves. No, it's because they have more gods, and everyone knows that 7 is better than 6. Okay, we have religious influence instead of doom as a resource, and we have a few religious activities: sacrifice noble blood, slowly prepare for the next cotton, prepare for the next cotton, strongly prepare for the next cotton, and pilgrimage, unfortunately not to the next cotton, but host a ceremony. Unfortunately, it's not also the cotton. But with this, we will have a Mayan calendar thing. Different from the Nahua ritualism, Maya ritualism doesn't have any doom, but centers instead around the concept of the cotton. Here we have cotton is a measure of time in the Mayan people. It corresponds to around 19.7 years. The end of one cotton and start of a new one was marked by many ceremonies and festivities, marking the occasion as a truly important date for a ruler and its people. Definitely important for a ruler, because with 20 years, it's probably the case that most rulers only were in power for 1 and maybe 2. If by the time the current cotton ends, we have invested enough resources to prepare for the celebrations, we will gain a cotton celebrated for 10 years. On the other hand, which is of course buy one, get one free, if we are not ready, we might gain a cotton celebration mismanaged for 10 years, and we will be fully ready once our religious influence is 90. So we need to push that resource of religious influence up to 90, and then we will be fully ready. Or is this fully ready? Is this super fully ready? Because there's 3 tiers of how good your cotton is. The mechanic revolves around preparing for the cotton celebrations every 20 years in the game. And this is kind of what we were talking about when we mentioned earlier how this forces you thematically. I really, really like this, because from a player perspective, forcing you to care about stuff that is not a Julian calendar thing is actually pretty neat, because you will care about roughly every 20 years. And it's not even every 20 years exactly. The player needs to invest resources using different actions to raise the country's preparation for the cotton, measured with the religious influence currency. The country can choose between 3 degrees of intensity in their preparations, and that will impact what they get while preparing for it. Now we have prepare, this isn't even the strong prepare, and the maximum tax modifier minus 20%. I don't know how long you will have to run this to fill up the bar, we could do math. That'll take a lot of months to get this amount of religious influence from that, and that's a really significant malice, especially in the early game. Because in the early game, you have maybe 20% total max tax, or something like this. Oversimplification, but maybe this is how you look at it. And so this means or 25%. Let's say we have 25%, because it makes the math look a little bit better. If we get minus 20% there, that's minus 80% of our income. But there are more sources of max tax kicking around, which is generally a really strong modifier. Generally, your throttle is more max tax than satisfaction, because if you give out a bunch of privileges, your pops will be happy, and you can tax them, and they will still be over a certain threshold of happiness, because taxes decrease their happiness. But the max tax is a throttle. If you already have 45% maximum tax, then this minus 20% max tax represents less of a negative modifier. Now, the money you take from your estates isn't deleted, but it seems like they're not very good at spending it wisely. And as a consequence of that, this should be regarded as kind of money that is lost to some extent. But continuing onward, not getting lost in the sauce of talking about taxes, the cotton will happen on the actual dates according to the historical Maya calendar. This is fascinating and super cool from a flavor perspective. So the first one to encounter once the game starts will be in September of 1342, with the following ones occurring every 19.7 years, so they will not always be on the same month. Once the cotton finishes, the country will get an event with different outcomes depending on how much preparation they were able to accomplish, as well as resetting the value of preparation back to 0. We get an event telling us about how we did, and here are the modifiers. And this modifier, mismanaged, doesn't really seem that bad, but when you compare it to the status quo of what you could get the next kind of tick up, it is a pretty big deal. We get tax efficiency minus 5%, morale is minus 5%, prestige minus 0.05, and efficiency of cabinet minus 5%. So this is a 15% difference between this and cotton celebrated, kind of all of the same modifiers, just for different values. Tax efficiency plus 10%. Now it's important to note this is a free money modifier, so whereas when we don't tax our estates, they get to keep the money, this creates money out of nothing. And so tax efficiency is particularly strong. It's not as strong as trade efficiency, I don't think, but it's way more accessible, and stacking a lot of it will be really valuable. And so it'll be interesting to think about how worth it is on this trade-off, and it might be the case that it's not worth it early on, because minus 20% tax is really expensive early on, but as you get more of that modifier, it gets better. Or if you just want to increase the satisfaction of your pops, you can do this. You tax them less, and then after taxing them less, you get a reward for it because you get a better cotton. But okay, we will also get prestige, efficiency of cabinet, and tolerance of the true faith, an introduction to a modifier that's not here in the mismanaged one. Here in Cotton Celebrated, it's the exact same modifiers, just doubled, which is going to be nice as well. A lot of satisfaction here for tolerance of the true faith too, which is going to make it so you can kind of tax your pops more. No, not tax your pops more. You tax the states get unhappy, estate satisfaction informs pop satisfaction, but it doesn't work in the opposite direction, because then you'd have a feedback loop. But okay, besides the normal preparations, additional actions can contribute to the gain of religious influence, and generally speaking, taking a look at these seem like the better way to go, rather than decreasing your max tax. But we have a sacrifice the noble blood, aka eating the rich, where the selected character might die. They do have to be a noble, and we will gain 10 religious influence and a clergy gain satisfaction. I wonder if you could do this to your rulers. If you can, again, another tool to get rid of your rulers, but this is pretty expensive. We see some gold cost and 15 satisfaction. That's quite a bit of satisfaction. In different phases of the game, satisfaction will have different value. And so it's tough to say how good this is. In particular, it gives a lot of qualifications. So if you're qualification throttled, this is going to be a relatively big deal for 10 religious influence, because you have to do this 9 times. So this ends up being like close to 150, a total stab hit. But you can do it over the course of 20 years. Again, it is going to be based on the calendar that is 19.7 years. We can also do Holy Site, pay a visit to it, where we will just have to pay quite a bit more money. But I think more money is generally a more accessible resource than stab. In the early game, stab really matters, and then once you get out of the early game, money gets a lot easier to get. But I imagine that this scales actually with the amount of money you have and the amount of money you're earning. And so, in particular, there's some phases to like when you earn more or less money. So when you are earning a lower amount of money, this is probably the time to invest in this. Also, Pyramid of the Magician. We love magic. Okay, the religion also has other ways to spend religious influence before the cotton comes, although at the risk of not being fully prepared when it does. Here we see we can expend 10. We can host a ceremony, which is going to get Unul Zek celebration for 1 year. On the Unul Zek, is that a particular god? Or we can sacrifice to a god. So this kind of brings back the prosperity thing, where early on, this might be really worth doing for some prosperity. It'll cost a little bit of gold, it'll also cost this, and the modifier granted by the celebration will be different depending on the date at which the ceremony is hosted, so you care about the calendar because you have to do it on the particular date that corresponds with the god, varying of course the historical Unyal. Same as the Nahua ritualism, Maya ritualism also has gods. Some of them are actually the same ones with different names, so we do have dynamic naming for gods. For example, Quetzalcoatl and Kulkulkan are the same god with different dynamic naming. In particular, we like shocking, but this monthly prosperity, we're salivating at the thought of doing it at the opener of the game. Okay, on to the tonal religion. Shout out to tonal languages where, they're really hard to speak. I don't want to try and speak different tones, actually. I was going to do that, but then let's not. Okay, this mechanic for gods is common to all tonal religions, as well as many of the folk religions. We can now show the loud card outside that we have decided to call tonal for the namesake of the tonal group, gathering under its umbrella beliefs related to those of the Nahua and Maya, but still distinct. Here we will see we have gods and we have religious aspects. We don't have the two resources of either doom or the religious preparation. I forget what it was called. We will have gods, but here we only have 3. We have Zahui, Quetzalcoatl, and this one, the Huehuetoatl. But also continuing on, the gods of the country of those religions will always present for the countries, but the countries can choose religious aspect to worship a specific god as their patron, doubling the effects of such a god. Also doubling this out of a loud car outside. Where here in particular, this seems like really, really nice to have this as a doubled bonus. I assume that is 0.1 base and then doubled is 0.20, something like this, but this can really allow you to tick up to 100 prosperity pretty quick. Something that's notable is having a bunch of unaccepted pops, a bunch of pops with low satisfaction, really, really eats into your prosperity basis. It's driven a lot by satisfaction, if I recall correctly, so this is one of the downsides, is you can actually get negative development if you have a bunch of people that are really upset with you. But in the early game, pushing this to 100 seems really, really quite valuable to be doing, and getting the monthly prosperity up. Also important to not get your territories occupied, because that will crush prosperity really, really fast. And if that's the type of game that's being played, this modifier gets good. But if you're able to just kind of avoid that type of thing, which I think you kind of can, then once you get up to 100, this stops being that useful. So in terms of early phases, though, it does seem like a really good one. But here's the one that seems really good, Quetzalcoatl, giving us army movement speed. Now, if this is actually doubled up to 20%, that's insane. And maneuverability seems weaker in general in Europa Universalis, just in general, than it does a lot of other games, but it always seems like kind of a strong modifier in any type of game where you're moving around troops on the battlefield, because it allows you to dictate where fights happen a lot. Just the thing is forts are kind of a very strong dictator in Europa Universalis. But this, depending on how good assaulting forts is, this can represent something that's really good, especially if you can combine this maybe with naval landing and this type of stuff, or any means by which you can get an army where your opponents do not suspect it, such as if you're like England and you're landing in France, and then you land an army in South France, and then it can move around really quickly, and you can siege down a fort quick and get into the interior of France, and then avoid the other armies because you have army movement speed, just getting occupations and zipping around. This seems like an absolute menace, and maybe like a kind of interesting modifier. Don't see army movement speed in a lot of places, and so this is interesting to be seeing. But that's all for today. No Happy Salutation sandwich. Everyone knows that Happy Salutations belong in sandwich format, and we don't get that from Pavia, but he's also not capitalizing the Wednesdays. We expect that he's going to welcome the Friday, though, which will leave us deeply confused in a state of, existential horror, as we have yet to discern what he means by welcoming the Friday and happying the Wednesday. But there we will be talking about the Aztecs, shout out to Human Sacrifice, and of course we can wishlist Europa Universalis 5 now. They insist on calling it that. The secret hidden name has yet to be revealed, except we revealed it at the start of the video. So without further ado, I must wish you a happy Wednesday again, because, well, happy Wednesday for the fourth time, really, because we recorded this twice now. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, do the YouTube algorithm thing, hit the notification bell, and other than that, of course, have a happy Wednesday, which is the 5th happy Wednesday that we have deployed today.